which he doesn't believe he does.
Yeah, what are these weekend things you
look at this camera, baby girl? There we go. All right. We should start seeing people's come in the chat room any minute.
It's a little hot in
Now, you always forget to launch one thing. Did you remember to launch that one thing today?
Start streaming.
You did the start streaming. Did you shut off the
streaming?
monitor?
I think the
I
streaming
did
is
not, baby
usually
girl.
what.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, people. If you're in the chat room, shout out.
Peeps.
Holla.
Hello, peeps in the chat room. We got 4 on Periscope. Everything's looking good. Twitch now online. I'm waiting for Facebook, the other Facebook. Hello, everyone. How are you doing out there? Oops.
Hello, friends.
Damn it.
So close.
I clearly maybe got too much sleep today, you guys. Look at this great, gorgeous opening banner that we have for you. And I put a lot of work into that. So now we'll show it instead of leaving it off when we start the show.
Cocktails first, questions later.
Cocktails first, that's true.
I had asked Rob to shut the hell up so we could bring him on as a guest, but with a line like that, you got to let...
Especially for a movie like this.
You've got to let a genius do what a genius does, man. There's no way around it.
Literally on the cover of the movie poster.
He's still a genius, god dang it. He is. All right, baby, you ready to
Genius
go live?
be genius in what?
Ready?
I am.
Can you hear yourself okay?
I can hear myself just fine. Thanks.
3. Hello, Richard. Hello, Sheepdog. Hello, Nelson. And hello, everyone. And welcome to our too bright room, which we don't know what is going on.
We're not good with the daylight. We're not good with the
daylight. Also, we're both incredibly pasty people. So as long as we don't fade entirely into the background, that's what really, really matters.
Now they know why we put the dark background behind us, so we can't be missed.
We are here for StorySmack episode number 64, 1996 movie, Swingers. Mm-hmm. Baby, you ready to get going so we can cut the audio for this? Okay, here we go. We're gonna find our center, ladies and gentlemen. And after this is what we'll share to the podcast feed as audio. And hit it.
This is StorySmack, a podcast about stories and storytellers in the world of pop culture. My name is A.B. Sigler. I am an audiobook narrator and founding partner at Empty Set Entertainment.
And my name is Scott Sigler, #1 New York Times bestselling novelist. And I am not the guy in the PG-13 movie everybody's really hoping that it will happen for. I'm the guy in the R-rated movie that you're not sure you like yet.
And as ever, back with us once again, because we're this lucky, is Empty Set movie maven, Rob Otto. How are you, Rob?
I am so money, and I don't even know it. Which honestly, just having said that made absolutely no sense.
I mean, that's not untrue in the movie either. But, Vince Vaughn is essentially spouting gibberish.
Rob and I have hung out with a lot of people that's all they do, including us, actually.
Including Scott and I.
Yes. If you guys are unaware, we are reviewing Swingers today. It is the 25th anniversary of this movie's release, and so we're going to talk about that. So we made classic lounge cocktails. On the West Coast, we are drinking Brown Derbies in honor of the Brown Derby, which is featured in the movie. Not named, but featured in the movie. And Rob, what are you drinking?
A gin and tonic sounds really, really good to me. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.
You are such a big bad voodoo daddy. It's crazy.
Oh, I am.
All right. And
do you want to give us the movie guy intro, Mr. Sigler?
Yes, I'll give you the movie guy intro. A transplanted New Yorker attempting to acclimate to Los Angeles, Mike Peters, played by Jon Favreau, is struggling to both boost his comedy career and get over his last relationship. A self-proclaimed master of seduction, Mike's buddy Trent Walker, played by Vince Vaughn, tries to show him how to make connections and get the attention of women. Slowly moving toward regaining his confidence, Mike meets the gorgeous and down-to-earth Lorraine, played by Heather Graham, sparking a welcome new romance.
I know it's the movie guy voice, but it's a little ominous for such a comedy. Like, it's a comedy, and he's like, he meets Lorraine.
I kind of feel that I'm sure that the joke of the movie is that Mike is not funny at all, and he's a comedian. And he's not he has no one-liners, no jokes, no nothing in this movie. So he's probably a psychopath. He's probably going to cut up Lorraine and put her in the trunk. And then blame it on Trent.
You watched this movie.
Well, we didn't see part 2. In part 2,
there's not. No.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
That's the Maid guy movie. What's that one called? The
Maid.
Maid. Yeah, it's Maid. It's Maid. Yeah.
Okay. You got your script?
So
Amy?
wait, maybe it's like Swingers 2, The Bunny Strikes Back or something like that?
The money
is that what it
strikes
is?
back. I think it'll have to be.
Swingers 2, in it for the money. All right, baby, tell us about the box office of this movie. How did it do?
So Swingers cost $200,000 back in 1996 to make, which is $329,000 in today's dollars. It is, that seems like we know this as an indie movie. That is an absolutely enormously great budget for an indie movie. It's also an enormous budget for an indie movie. A lot of indie movies make much, much smaller budgets.
Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't even cross a street for $329,000. Come on.
It grossed $6.6 million in theaters, which is $11 million in 2021 money. And that, pretty baby, is an absolute hit.
That is a huge hit. Huge hit. We're going to talk how this helped launch a couple of careers that were already in the making, but it's a seminal movie and it's great. Rob, what is your general thoughts? Like, we're going to go with the high-level thoughts, and we'll get into characters, and then we're going to talk about all the cool backstory of how this movie got made.
Well, I think the biggest thing is A already touched on it, right? This is an indie film, a bigger budget indie film, but still an indie film. And the idea that if you've got a great idea and talented people, that on a smaller budget and with breaking some minor zoning restrictions and laws, that you can create something that 25 years later, people are still talking about. Like, if you can figure out the way to stretch that money and do some guerrilla filmmaking, and we'll get into some of the details on how they did that. This is a long-lasting film, and it comes right down to, Scott, what you do, right? The script.
Yeah.
The script's great. It is really well written, and that's why this movie holds up so well.
And, that makes a ton of sense, because if you think about, and we'll talk about this, but if you think about where John Favreau headed from Swingers, and he's the one who wrote this screenplay, you can sort of see, like, it's nice to see a guy in Hollywood doing the right thing the right way. And, there's a lot to be said for these being young people in Hollywood and young people in Vegas and whatever. But really, the movie also holds up over time for interpersonal relationship sort of status. And I love that, too.
Yeah. My general thoughts on the movie come down to the curse count. The word fuck is used 95 times. The word bitch 31 times. And asshole 13 times. That is by far the most important part of this whole movie.
You're saying the curse count is more important than the fact that it put Jon Favreau on the map. You understand what Jon Favreau did with his career.
I'm just saying, you gotta
just checking.
You gotta have a good curse count, because as we know, the vast majority of my bad reviews on Amazon come from a potty mouth. So I like to celebrate. It was a good story, but why does he have to talk like that? That's not how people talk. I'm like, come hang out with Rob and I. That is exactly how people talk.
Watch Swingers, baby. That's how.
I have a question, Rob. Did you watch this movie in the last week or two?
Yeah, so here's the funny thing. I watched it about 3 or 4 days ago, and then at like 9 o'clock last night on HBO Comedy, boom, Swingers came out. So I watched it again last night.
So in the interim from a few days ago to now, have you been peppering all of your conversation with money and baby money and baby? Us two.
Yeah, the
Pretty baby.
money thing.
Pretty baby.
Yeah, you're so money,
you're
and you
so
don't
money.
even know it.
So many times. I'm so much older than I should be to use
but you know
those
what? Every
languages.
time I go downstairs to grab something, I'm like, hey, pretty baby. You're like,
It's just so silly.
You love
Listen, if you weren't encouraging him, he would stop.
Oh, I'm doing it too, though. I'm doing it like.
Rob's known me for 40 years plus, and I not encouraging me
he
doesn't
actually
matter. I do it
doesn't
anyways.
stop.
It's true.
Honestly, the more you try to discourage him, probably the more he would do it.
I have started to learn this about Scott, yes.
All right, Rob, speaking of Jon Favreau, who is, for all of Vince Vaughn's massive success, Jon Favreau is the Hollywood titan that came out of this movie. But he had so many tasks in this movie. Why don't you tell us about his roles?
Yeah, he was the auteur, right? I mean, he starred, he wrote in it, he co-produced it. I mean, he stuck to his guns to make sure that the guys he wanted to star in this movie, his friends, actually were able to be in the movie. So it's such a cool story. He wrote this script. His dad got him a script writing software, right back in the mid 90s, and he just thought, well, I'll just test it out and see if I can write a script on this new software. And in less than 2 weeks, he bangs out Swingers. I mean, baby, that is so money.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
So
what I'm
money.
talking about. And that's the thing, is that he wrote the part for himself. He wrote it for Ron Livingston. He wrote it for Vince Vaughn. That's what it was. And then they had to start shopping it around, right? And so he knew Ron Livingston. They were together in an improv group. He met Vince Vaughn and became fast friends with him. They were both in the movie Rudy about 3 years before this one was released. So, likelihood he wrote it and started trying to sell it right around the same time that he was starring in Rudy, and that Vince Vaughn had that bit part. And so that's just where all this came from. And it was real life, right? Yeah. It was his story.
Well,
now,
go ahead.
Not from New York, but from Chicago.
Okay.
He had come out to LA, he had broken up with his long-term girlfriend, and it was Vaughn and Livingston that kind of helped keep him sane and help him work through it. And that's really what this script is about. It's about a hopeless romantic who can't let go of somebody until the real hero of this story shows up and shows him that he really is money. He should have known it.
Yeah. And Vince Vaughn, of course, is the other major star. We'll get to Heather Graham, but she had a running start into this.
Yeah, for sure.
Vaughn,
but she's also not one of the main characters. She shows up sort of later in the thing. But
this made Vince, right?
It definitely did. But I want to point out about Jon Favreau and this creation story. We see this sometimes in indie film. We certainly saw it in The Boondock Saints. We saw it in Clerks for sure. And Clerks, of course, was not any kind of a romance or whatever, but it was a comedy. And The Boondock Saints, of course, had a lot in going for it. But what's interesting about both of those movies is, The Boondock Saints has this long and storied backstory. And then Troy Duffy, who wrote it and was the auteur, absolutely believed that he was the absolute business and kind of never got anything else off the ground. And then there's Kevin Smith, who if he talks about doing Clerks, and to this day he'll talk about, it was an indie film, and yes, I maxed out $37,500 in credit cards.
Right.
But the only reason you see it is that it stopped being an indie film when Miramax put $1 million of advertising behind it, and he's completely transparent about it. And then you have the kid actor who grows up to be Fred Savage, for example. This is Jon Favreau. He makes this indie movie that shouldn't, by all expectations, shouldn't have become Swingers, and he uses his power for good. He doesn't become an egotistical maniac. He doesn't become a drug addict. He just makes better movies that we all enjoy. And more good movies that we all enjoy.
Vince Vaughn has become all of the above.
Absolutely.
Listen, I will argue one point about Clerks. Yeah. I think it is a love story. Jay and his hetero life mate, Silent Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
For sure. I stand welcomely corrected, yes. So Vince Vaughn, by this time, had small parts in 21 Jump Street and Doogie Howser, MD. And of course, that bit part in Rudy that you talked about. Swingers, without a doubt, put him on the path to stardom. If you watched Swingers in the last 2 weeks and you have also in the last 30 years watched A River Run Through It, you see that this is Vince Vaughn's same star-making as a leading man role as A River Runs Through It. It's totally kowtowed to the babies. All the ladies love that lean dude with the big hair and whatever.
Yeah.
But he's actually focused on his friends. I mean, except for the one part in the Airstream. But other than that, he's focused on his friends. And I like that approach because it's a great platform. You don't see the depth that Vince Vaughn will eventually bring to True Detective, which his season wasn't the best. He was terrific in it, though. And so thanks to Swingers, he ends up doing Old School and Dodgeball and Anchorman and Jurassic Park: The Lost World.
Yeah.
And then Wedding Crashers, right? And you see the genre that he's going for. And what's interesting about this is where he started is a much bigger palette and a much bigger canvas. So he has that potential in him. He's just so good at the Judd Apatow sort of roles that he does a lot of that.
And his part in Jurassic World comes from this movie, which we will get to. But Pretty Baby, tell us about that lovely car.
I know that lovely car that he drives in the movie. This is great. So he drives the sweetest ride. And of course, if you watch Swingers, you know that there's a whole scene about what you drive. That car, a 1964 convertible Mercury Comet Caliente, was actually owned by Jon Favreau.
That's the best
Caliente.
part.
So Favreau was sort of a little bit Trent and a little bit Mike. And, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the things in and around Favreau's life show up all the time in this movie. We'll see it again in a few minutes, too. So you're gonna want to tell us about Ron Livingston?
Let's talk about the last of the trio.
The Holy Trinity.
The Holy Trinity. Ron Livingston, who of course has been in one of my favorite, probably everybody's favorite movies, but he had he was already a working actor. He'd done an episode of Jag, and that was about it. It took him some time to break out, and he had been in TV series That's Life and Townies. Of course, then it was Office Space that made him the household name that he's, at least in the nerd community. If you've ever worked in an office, worked as a programmer, worked in marketing, anything like that, you've watched Office Space. And then this eventually led to his huge performance in Band of Brothers, which is, if you're an American and have never watched Band of Brothers, go get it. Watch Band of Brothers.
If you're not, if you're movie buff, I think.
If you're a movie buff or need to appreciate the military of any country, including Germany, frankly, as they did such a good job with it, you watch that. Now he's since been a regular on Sex and the City, Boardwalk Empire, and he's pretty much, if you look at his IMDb page, he's been working nonstop since Swingers right now, and he's so busy right now. TV series that are in the last year, this year, the year before, like last 3 years, Loudermilk, Search Party, Pantheon. He's absolutely killing it.
And he's got another one where you see him in his breakout role, which I'll call Office Space and not Swingers. He's certainly fine in Swingers, but it's not his vehicle.
Right.
But Office Space clearly is Ron Livingston's vehicle, and he follows that up. His next big starring thing is Band of Brothers, and Band of Brothers does that same thing I was talking about with Vince Vaughn, where you see the real, true ability to act in Band of Brothers for all the dramatic stuff. Good. And also, it would be easy to assume that Ron Livingston, in his part in Swingers, is not really acting; he's just being Ron Livingston. But that's always bullshit. Nobody is themselves with 400 lights and boom mics and 16 people watching you say this one thing. You're not yourself, even though if you look like yourself. So I love that he also has a back and forth with his career, so you can see him as a well-rounded actor, because often comedies are overlooked for the skill they take to get it right.
You know what? Okay, totally. I'm having a terrible day here. Here we go.
Look, hi, Tony. Look at him. He's so cute.
Pictures of the actors. Rob, as we're talking about these lovely people, the person who was the most established in this movie was Heather Graham.
Yeah, right. Heather Graham,
and
if you want to talk about somebody who owned the mid to late 90s, Heather Graham can be in that conversation.
Geez,
right? We tend to go to the actors more than the actresses, but Heather Graham was huge, and this movie was just like a little stepping stone for her. It really helped launch her out. But at the time, she'd been in some Growing Pains episodes. She'd done some stuff in Twin Peaks. She was in Diggstown, which is a hugely underrated movie that I would love to do a StorySmack on.
What a great movie. What a great movie. Let's do that. I'm with you.
Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, right? But she is just about, like, right as this movie came out, she's about to do Boogie Nights, Scream 2, Lost in Space, Austin Powers. I mean, she explodes right as this movie is being released into movie theaters, and her career is just absolutely huge. Now, she has kept working. She actually had a real downturn for a while. She was in a TV series that, God, I can't even remember the name of it. It literally aired the first episode, and it was so bad they canceled it after the first episode.
Wow.
So she took a real downturn until she came back in 2009 in The Hangover, and now all of a sudden she is a highly sought after, older working actress.
Her in The Hangover was so amazing because it had very established actors, but all of a sudden Heather Graham shows up as the stripper, the Heart of Gold, and it was fantastic.
Well, and it's Heather Graham looking hot like fire. Heather Graham, hot like fire in The Hangover, right?
Right.
And completely understands that, she had a few years off, whatever, but she is not only hot like fire in this movie, but she's hot like fire, and this is a Heather Graham comeback, and she can just eat it all up, and she just deserves it.
Yeah. And then
you want to talk hot like fire. I mean, when Lorraine appears, and it's the only time we see her on screen is the last few minutes of this movie. But she has like that 50s
victory rolls,
along her.
And actually, Rob, just so you know, that's called a victory roll, and that's the picture that's up right now next to us.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. And the bright red lipstick and just absolutely angelic. Yeah, and when Favreau first sees her, gets a smile, somebody walks between her and the camera, comes back, it's the little bunny. They should have given the victory curls to the bunny. I'm just saying. That's just me. That was a director's choice, but and really, this is why I say she's the hero of this movie, right? Favreau, Mikey, seeing her, his confidence goes from 0 to 100 almost immediately. And he walks over to her and he sits down. And the funny thing is, first thing out of his mouth is when she says her name's Lorraine, he talks about quiche Lorraine. And she's like, boy, I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
And she could have ended it right there. And if she ends it right there, Mikey's back down to 0.
Right.
And she keeps the conversation going. They find out they have something in common. She's the one that asks him to dance. Once the swing song comes on,
and then
he
he's
tries to walk away. She brings him back.
Yep.
I mean, and then they swing dance, which they had practiced. They had rehearsed, just the two of them, for like a month at Heather Graham's house leading up to this performance.
That's
but
awesome.
She validates Mikey being money. And then it's all on. It's on. Oh, it's so on. It is so on.
They also practiced at the Derby where that film was shot, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. The locations in this movie, and we might talk about it a little later, but the locations are basically places that Vaughn and Livingston and Favreau hung out, right? Yeah. So the Derby, which you guys are drinking a brown Derby, that was the brown Derby used to be the old, 30s, 40s restaurant there. That got gone. The Derby took over it for a while, and now that's gone, and it's like a law office or something now.
And in case you guys, since we
shame.
only saw the interior of the brown Derby, when it was the brown Derby for ages, when it was the brown Derby bar in Hollywood, on the roof-ish, on top of the roof, was a derby, a brown derby hat, a giant brown derby hat. Yeah, so it was, especially in the 90s when this swingers cocktail vibe happened in Hollywood and everywhere else too, but especially in Hollywood, that was all of a sudden after 40 years, the Derby is back in business and doing all the cool drinks and getting all the cool honeys and getting all the sweet money and all the babies and whatever.
Right.
Now, Rob, I still I see this gentleman's name and I only see the word dessert because I like desserts a whole lot. How do you pronounce this actor's last name?
Okay, well, first of all, if you knew the English language, you would know that's desert.
Desert, still.
Because dessert has 2 S's, right? You always get a second helping of dessert.
I like dessert a lot, but it's...
Yeah, exactly right. It's Dessert. It's French. It's Alex Dessert.
Alex Dessert. So the last actor we're going to cover, and there's so many actors in this, there's a lot going on, but we don't have that much time. So we're going to talk about Alex Dessert because he has come full circle into the nerd world in Force A. Tell us about Alex Dessert.
Well, what's interesting about him too is I was going to say this about Rob's great point about Heather Graham. One of the things that Heather Graham's character does is, without question, shore up Mike in the movie. However, she's also, that person exists in every town, in every Saturday night bar where you're just trying to go and meet somebody new. She's not Hollywood, she's her. She's real. She's a thing we can all connect to. And so is this character. He is like, he's the workaday actor who's doesn't have like his head in the stars or whatever. He's like, dude, I just want to pay my rent and get high, like have some fun and get a few drinks and hang out with my friends. That's what I'm trying to do, where we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but there are so many scenes in this movie which are iconic Hollywood, like things that we all think if we get on a bus and we go to Hollywood to become a big star, we're going to have to do. There's the, what car do you drive? And the, I can't drink with you at that bar because it's not classy enough. And he's just like, man, I just want to do my job, go home, have a thing, whatever. So he started in 90210, I think.
Yep.
He was in the 1990s version of The Flash.
Which is cringeworthy, but great.
Yeah, he had a recurring role in Boy Meets World. And he has done a ton of work since Swingers, a ton of voice work and cartoons and video games. And right now, he's Carlson on The Simpsons. And he's done that for years and years as well.
He was also in PCU, which is another one, Rob. I think that might be 25 or 30 years in.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Heck yeah.
Oh, my God, that movie. And I watched it, I think I watched PCU a couple of months ago, and I'm like, okay, literally nothing has changed. This is fascinating.
If anything, it's more PC. So, and that's the role I know him best from.
Yeah.
Is
for
him
sure,
in PCU. So yeah, I would love to do that. A story smack on that one too. That'd be great.
And once you become a regular on The Simpsons, you are a legend. That is just the way things work.
For sure.
So now we're going to go into we've introduced the actors in this movie, and now we're going to talk about some of the awesome backstory of a movie that wound up launching multiple A-lister careers. Rob, tell us a little bit about how this movie got made.
So Favreau's script, which again he wrote in less than 2 weeks, and once they started shopping it around, there was a lot of interest. There were big movie production companies that wanted to get on board with this movie. But I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or not, Scott, but some people in Hollywood, they like to change the source material once they see it. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with that, Scotty.
Yeah, I have.
But hey, there were people, willing to put millions of dollars behind this, but they're like, well, we just have to change a few small things. Like Trent, let's make him a woman.
What?
All right. And let's not put the people you want to star in this. Let's put Johnny Depp and Jason Priestley. Right. Let's put,
Jason
that's
Priestley.
who we want to star in this movie.
Love Jason Priestley, but Jason Priestley, come on.
No, come on. He's not money. He doesn't know it. You know what? Yes, this is an excellent movie. You know what it means? More violence. Yes, that's apparently a boy named Sue was supposed to shoot somebody outside the Derby that night. So that's
because that says comedy 6 ways to Sunday.
That was a rewrite.
Yeah, exactly.
That was one of the rewrites. They wanted Sue to shoot.
No, they wanted more violence, and that's the only violence. I mean, other than Wayne Gretzky's head bleeding on the ice, I guess that was maybe they added that violence in, right? Yeah, and then or they wanted we want less honeys, monies, and babies. What? No, that's what we all say when we talk about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's no money, baby. Or let's not send them to Vegas. What?
So it's and Favreau started doing this with his friends at readers, live reads, trying to get interest in the script, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And a woman that Favreau had known from a previous project, Nicole Elagia, she said, I would love to work on this. She ends up being a line producer in the final production, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she's on board from one of these live reads that she was able to see. And she's like, well, you know what? My roommate's a director, and he's been trying to get a feature film. His name's Doug Liman. And then Doug Liman comes to the table, and he's like, well, my dad's business partner has wanted to fund a film. Maybe I can get the money from him.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened. Nicole's roommate's Doug's father's business partner put up $200,000, but Doug Liman had to direct.
Mm-hmm.
And Doug Liman, they said, okay, Doug, you direct, but Favreau, Livingston, and Vaughn have to star in this movie. And everyone said, okay, let's make a movie.
And I love this so much because, we talk about this a lot. And Scott, you've talked quite publicly about the need to move to Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
And this is why. You're going to meet, and we have met, zillions of people who have all the stars in their eyes and not only no power, but also no willingness to work for it. And then these people turn out to be kismet in this way where they're all hungry. They're all willing to do the hard work.
Yeah.
And Nicole Elagia, thank goodness, who also ends up being the voice of Michelle on the phone at the very end of the movie, which I love as a denouement for her that she gets credit in Swingers as a character as well. She's like, no, Doug has to direct it, but also you finally get what you have been insisting on and giving up a chance to make the movie so that your boys can be in it too. And I don't say that lightly. I don't mean like he just wanted his pals in it. He knew the way to make these characters sing was to make these actors those characters as well. And I think that was the right thing to do. And that takes a lot of cojones. Jon Favreau had to walk away from deals he could have made and taken the money and run, and he didn't do it. And that it makes me happy for him.
And
that he's now Jon Favreau.
One of those success stories. A lot of people who are trying to get into movies, trying to get into showbiz, there's now this theory that you don't have to move to LA. And A and I were actually on the cusp of moving to LA before the pandemic hit. Now we're like,
Thanks,
old.
COVID.
This is fine. Thanks, COVID. But it is these social connections and stumbling into people who wind up becoming the guy behind the guy. Like the closest we have come to getting a show actually made was with Joseph Kahn, who's a director of many, he's like the most successful music video director ever. I met him in the line at Dragon Con while we were in the sushi line. Like,
and y'all know
all the work
Peachtree
I've done,
Center's sushi buffet. That's where they met.
Out of all the work I've done, all the meetings I've had, everything, the closest I've come was with a guy I met in a sushi line at a sci-fi con.
So we're going to talk about
of rice and raw fish has been the best move for your career.
Yeah,
right?
actually, I'm the best move for his career, but the
like-
second best move.
And like the director of this, who is a random connection, goes on to
Yeah, make The Bourne Identity. He makes
Wow.
so many things. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Edge
I
of
loved.
Tomorrow. Yeah. But before, I want you to talk a little bit about like also being part of a moment. You just mentioned it for us. Like we were tossing the idea around to move to LA so you would be more in the mix and all that other stuff. And then stuff happens around you. COVID happened around us and it changed the plan. Likewise, I think in this movie, they're all there because they want to be actors, not because the craft cocktail scene is coming or the swinger scene is coming. And that happens when they're all there and they make the most of it. I think you can tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this movie came about with the revival of the swing culture, which happened in the 90s, and that was revisiting what was big in the 40s, Hollywood nightlife, swing music, including the band Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. A lot of the slang used in the film became popular in the years since its release, which, of course, money became a catch-all term. Vegas, baby, which Rob
Vegas, baby,
Rob and I
Vegas,
have
come on.
said Vegas. We've been to Vegas dozens of times, etc.
And we've said that.
We've said that every goddamn time. This I didn't know. The film also gave exposure to the term wingman. I thought that was a common term, but apparently not. And then, of course, the real reference to the swing generation. Trent, Mikey, Sue, Rob, and Charles represent the 5 members of the original Rat Pack: Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, and Sammy Davis Jr. Baby. Yeah. It's and that was just such a wonderful piece of Americana, and this movie tried to celebrate that amongst many other things.
Yeah, but I also think like Vegas Baby is such a known quantity of a thing. Very few outside of that phrase, not a lot of people use Baby You Were So Money unless you're sort of talking about this gestalt or this movie or this environment. And I also love that because it's, any colloquialism that gives you a chance to kind of find your, I hate to say it this way, but sort of find your tribe. That seems a little highfalutin to say it that way, but that kind of thing where you're like, oh, these people make sense to me, I think is useful and good.
Yeah. When you say that, if someone picks up on it, you're automatically connected because you both know where that came from. You know the source material.
Oh, good point.
And you obviously both enjoyed it because it stuck with you.
Speaking of source material, you were the one who told us about Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Yeah, and that they were regulars there and whatever.
Yeah, and so it's funny. Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. It was the same time there were just a couple of these swing bands that actually got radio airplay. I was working at a radio station in the mid-90s, so the Edge, an alternative radio station in Lansing, Michigan, that was playing Big Bad Voodoo Daddy in our rotation, right? But yeah, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, this is, again, why it's such a slice of life from that moment of Jon Favreau's life, right? They were regulars at the Derby. They were regulars at the Dresden Room. And they knew these guys, and they would see Big Bad Voodoo Daddy would play there 3 or 4 nights a week at the Derby, and they got to know them. They became friends. And so when he wrote this movie, he just wrote Big Bad Voodoo Daddy into the movie.
Okay.
And they were all like, hell yeah, you can come shoot during one of our shows. And that's just what they did.
Yeah.
Right? The guys are up there playing, the cameras are rolling, and they're just going to go and have a show. And that's exactly what they did. The dancers, they were just people who were regular dancers at the Derby when Big Bad Voodoo Daddy was playing. That was it.
I understand the same thing is true at the Dresden Room, right?
Oh, this is so cool. So,
it's so
there's the
cool.
scene when they walk. I love this. When they walk into the Dresden Room and there's like the old guy playing drums and his wife playing the keyboards and they're singing Staying Alive, right? The Bee Gees song, right? That is Marty and Elaine. And Marty and Elaine this year in 2021, even though they had to take some hiatus because of the COVID, they have just celebrated their 38th year playing multiple nights a week. They are still playing 3 or 4 times a week at the Dresden Room in Los Angeles. Just that duet singing pop songs. And they are still there 25 years later. They are still playing the Dresden
and
Room.
anymore.
Awesome
I mean,
is that?
They had been doing that for over a decade by the time Swingers happens. And anymore, I know I've been to the Dresden Room twice, and the first time I went was specifically to see this duet.
Oh, you've
Really?
seen
Marty and Elaine?
awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, just because, and of
That's
course
cool.
that's why they're still there, because the Dresden Room is like, oh no. People will come on a freaking Monday night because they're flying out of LA tomorrow. They're coming on their Monday night to watch you guys do the same orchestrations you've been doing for 40 years. And they're like, cool,
so those
we'll do
of
it on
you
Thursday.
who are in LA, now that places are reopening again, you need to make plans to go on some Wednesday to the Dresden Room and watch Marty and Elaine. Why would you not do that?
Go there,
I
get
don't
some drinks.
understand.
tip as big as you can. Tip those guys. They've been doing it for almost 40 years. So
And they're
celebrate.
super fun, and it's worth doing.
And speaking of music, that gets us back to the Vince Vaughn angle.
Yeah. So in this movie, there's the Jaws theme is used in this movie, and it's used with more than 10 notes, so it's required that they get permission. So how they did that is Doug Liman, as the director, sent a cut of this movie to Steven Spielberg, who watched it and obviously gave approval to use the Jaws theme, but also saw Vince Vaughn and cast him in The Lost World, which I love.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
it's
amazing.
that is absolutely money. That one is so money.
Yes, that is so money.
Because that was a huge get for Vince Vaughn at that time. I mean, now he had his big star turn, and now he's doing other things. But all actors have the struggling era, the one breakout role, then capitalize on the breakout role. Eventually, they percolate up to the big budget films, and you get to run the big budget films. And then, of course, like all things in entertainment, runs its course and you come back down. But that was one of his big entrees was being seen because they were asking for permission to use the theme from Jaws. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of little things like that happen. You see a lot, which is the reason I brought up those other indie movies like Clerks and Boondock Saints. There are things like there's this one, you see it a lot at the beginning. Mike goes back to his apartment and decides he's going to call Michelle again, and it's like 3 a.m. in Chicago and whatever, and he's walking back and forth in his shitty little apartment in the Valley, I think, and maybe it's in Hollywood. It's actually probably in Hollywood, and he keeps going to the fridge because he's pacing in this tiny room, and part of that is to show that he lives this tiny existence, sort of. But every time he walks, there's nowhere to go, and every time he walks into the kitchen, because that's his only other option, and this is actually Jon Favreau's apartment, there's no light, there's not enough light, and there's not a window, so he has to keep opening the fridge door, like we all do. Like maybe my perfect snack materialized. But the reason he's doing that is if he stands in that room too long, the camera can't see him. So he keeps opening that light to give himself light for the camera. And I love that. And, I'm not sure that was permitted, but I'm going to guess that wasn't. And they also used the outside of his apartment building, which is really where Favreau lived. And they didn't get a permit for that either, I'm going to guess.
They didn't get a permit to shoot, when they did shoot the swing dancing scene, the Lorraine scene, there's no permit. The bar was actually open with patrons. There was a sign in front of the bar that said, hey, once you pass this line, you might wind up being an uncredited, unpaid extra in a movie.
Yeah.
So they just literally shot it, and somebody had to actually go. There was a guy in that chair that Jon Favreau was supposed to sit down in for Lorraine. Yeah. Somebody had to go move him out of the chair. A regular patron, hey buddy, we're trying to shoot a film here. Shake your ass down to the other end of the bar. So it was a live bar with regular patrons, and they shot this iconic scene. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Rob, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about guerrilla, right? Guerrilla filmmaking, right? You got $200,000. You can't afford everything you want to afford, including apparently permits. So, for instance, there was, and the funny thing is at the time, so there's that great scene when they're leaving Vegas and they're parked on the side of the freeway having that conversation, right? There was actually no way at the time to get a permit to shoot on an interstate highway. So they just started shooting. They just pulled over. And not long after, Nevada State Police pull up and start asking them what's going on. So Lyman's assistant director basically says, oh yeah, we've got the permit. It's back at the office. Let me call somebody to try and get here. She's basically off to the side. When they shot that scene, the police are just off camera.
Wow.
And they said, no, we're not shooting. We're just rehearsing. And Lyman shot the whole thing from like 3 different angles. They got the whole scene, and then they just left.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we can't find it. Let us go.
We're going to get that back to you. We're going to mail it to you. It's going to be great.
Yeah. We'll make sure to contact you the next time we're going to come out here to actually shoot that scene. But thanks for letting us rehearse.
And I will say, I have a theater degree. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. I have some, low budget movie experience. I will say without reservation, there's a reason you need a permit. And we're only celebrating this story because it became Swingers, but it happens all the time. There's a reason for a permit so that you can safely do what you're doing. And there must be tens of thousands of projects that ended in tragedy that we'll never know about. So I appreciate the skirting of the permits, but
Straight shooter.
no, I'm not being exactly a straight shooter. I have done things without a permit too, but there's a reason that they're there, and that's to protect the people who are working, and especially the people who aren't Brad Pitt or Vince Vaughn today, and they're low on the totem
That
pole.
sounds like it should be one of my short stories. I did some things without a permit. And going on with the gorilla, I mean, they could not afford to pay extras, so the multiple scenes at parties were filmed at actual parties that were actually taking place with many Hollywood up-and-comers in attendance. The house was Wick Godfrey and Martin Bowen, who later produced the Twilight film. So that's another whole thing about moving to LA. Rob, what are some of your other favorite stories of this
I
gorilla shoot?
want to build on that, though. Can you imagine, okay, you're an up-and-coming actor or actress, you're a beautiful person in Los Angeles, you hear about this party up in the hills, you go there, and it's just a normal party, you're helping yourself to drink some food and beverage, and then, 3 or 4 people are walking around with cameras.
Yeah.
Just in the middle of this party.
I bet they don't even bat an eye. They don't bat an eye at that. It probably happens all the time.
That's what I'm saying. You don't just walk up to them and say, "What the fuck's going on over here?" No, you're just like, should I put more gin in my drink? Yes, I should. But that's L.A., right? That's Hollywood,
and
baby.
That's what it is. It sort of reinforces that in L.A., you don't go out to a party unless you are ready to be discovered, right?
Oh,
you
I
don't
see.
do that. You
Yeah.
don't go out like, you see, there's a meme on the internet, which is like, freshman college girls at their first party and senior college girls at their last party, and
Okay.
it's one photo of a girl super cute, dressed up, hair done, heels, tiny little purse, tiny little skirt, and then somebody with like a messy bun and sweatpants and a crop t-shirt that they tore up themselves. And that's true, right? Like, you go out in Hollywood. I have been to parties here in San Diego with my friends, or I have hosted parties where I didn't get out of my sweatpants, right? Because it's a movie night or something.
Yeah.
That's not how you go to an LA party if you are in the business, And of course, there's not everybody in the business, but if you're in the business and you're going to a party,
You got to look good.
you got to show up looking good, which
Yep.
makes it the perfect venue to guerrilla film because everybody's a
I
starlet.
would like to point out, though, at my college parties, I hit on both of those chicks.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that you wouldn't. I'm just saying that if you're trying to be the next, the next big bang.
All right, I want A to feel better about the illegal filmmaking that was
Okay.
Swingers. So I will let you know, A, they did get permits to shoot when they were in Vegas. So the
Some of them.
exteriors of the Stardust, they got permission to shoot at the exterior of the Stardust, but Stardust wanted to charge them too much money to film the interiors. So they went to Fremont Street, which Scott and I know quite well from our visits to Vegas. Yeah, and they just went to the Fremont Casino, and they paid to shoot the interiors at the Fremont Casino. And again, got permits and paid for the right to film there. So
What I love
awesome.
about
Feel
that
better now.
is they do that, and this is pre the reinvention of the Fremont Street experience
Yes,
downtown.
that's
right?
true.
So
Yes.
It's
you guys, I know,
pre-roof, right?
pre-roof,
Okay.
pre all of that.
Yeah.
I know
Yep.
you guys have gone on a Vegas trip and stayed at the Four Queens recently when it's been redone, and then it's beautiful. It's sort of old Hollywood vibes, still downtown, or I'm sorry, old Vegas vibes, still downtown, all that jazz. Back then, when they were filming, it was old. It was an old Vegas vibe. It was just old.
Just old.
So you actually, if you watch it when they have that beautiful car, that's Favreau's car, and they get out of the car and whatever, and they slam it, and they've got that like the roof of light bulbs and whatever,
gorgeous.
and you can see into the casino. And then when you go into the casino that they're in on Fremont Street, is way more dank. Way more dank.
Way dank and darker.
Yeah, and right, like the old lady at the $5 that doesn't know she's not supposed to hit on a 17. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yep.
That kind of stuff. Which, by the way, that's Vince Vaughn's grandmother.
Oh, there we go.
John Favreau's father is the big winner at the $100 table.
I love it.
Wow, that's amazing.
I
got
also
the family
really
involved.
wonder, but I couldn't. I actually looked to see if I could tell. I wonder if where they stayed in Vegas, because I'm gonna guess it wasn't at the Fremont. I feel like they left their beautiful.
Oh no, they stayed well out of town.
Yeah,
drove
they
in.
left
Or,
their beautiful
listen.
convertible at the Stardust. I think probably.
Did they literally drive into town at 6 o'clock in the morning and leave at 6 o'clock in the
Possible.
They
morning?
may
I mean,
have.
it's
Yeah,
entirely
they may have.
possible.
Yeah, for sure.
And
And I would like to point out the actress, the pretty baby who brings them their scotch and water for the 50-cent chip.
okay.
Yeah, I doubt that that is the quality of server you're going to get on Fremont Street in the mid-90s on a Wednesday midnight to 6 a.m.
Yeah.
shift. I'm just saying
Yeah, it's possible.
that might be stretching it a little bit.
So the first time I ever went to Las Vegas, I wanted to stay at the Stardust. It was, I think it was 1993. And I am a big Elvis fan. You may or may not know that about me. A big Elvis, and especially a big Elvis kitsch fan. So I love Graceland. I've been to Graceland a zillion times.
Really?
I love all of that. And I really, really wanted to go to Vegas and see some of the hotels that I knew, Vegas was reinventing itself starting with the MGM. And I knew that like the Hacienda where Elvis and Priscilla got married was definitely on the chopping block. The Stardust, definitely on the chopping block. So the very first time I went to Las Vegas, I stayed at the Stardust Hotel just to get that experience, and it was totally worth it. I also got to stay at the Hacienda about 2 weeks before they closed for the eventual implosion of the Hacienda. And I've been to Vegas 10,000 times since then, and I will tell you that while I'm glad I did it, I'm also glad those hotels are gone. They were not fancy.
No. Rob, these guys obviously, when they made this, they had a love of film, and they were showing a lot of their influences right in their sleeve.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of the homages to directors' films, etc.
So in Trent's apartment, we see Taxi Driver poster, we see Reservoir Dogs poster, right? They have the conversations about Scorsese versus Tarantino, and is Tarantino just stealing from Scorsese, and Mean Streets and Reservoir Dogs and all this stuff. And then the cool thing is they reference two specific scenes, the Tarantino Reservoir Dog scenes where they're all slowly walking, right? And they mention, the scenes from Goodfellas where they had to walk the steady cam shot all the way through the kitchen of the club, and they had to walk through all that. And then later in the movie, they do the Scorsese slow walk, and they do the walking through the kitchen of the club the first time they go to see Big Bad Voodoo Daddy at the Derby. And so it's, their point was, hey, everybody steals from everybody. Then they stole from everybody. Yeah. Which is just what filmmaking pretty much
and
is.
There's a neat little sort of twist around where Rob and Mike order a Dewar's on the Rocks and a Budweiser, which are the same drinks in Sea of Love that Al Pacino and John Goodman order. And then in Heat, later on, Al Pacino, in the diner scene, the Michael Mann film, he, against De Niro, he orders a Dewar's on the Rocks.
Nice. Yeah. See, there you go. Exactly right. And if you want to talk about George Lucas and, obviously the effect of our generation that Star Wars had on us. Yeah. Sue's car, the license plate is THX 1138, which, any George Lucas fans know, that was the first film that he ever made, about a robot. And that number, the THX and the 1138, show up over and over and over again, both in George Lucas films and in other people's films, kind of say, hey, you're the one that started this whole next generation of directors, and we want to give you a little homage. So that was Trent's license plate. I think I said Sue's license plate. It was Trent's license plate.
And Rob has one more very important note. Those of you who've watched this and did not grow up on video games back in the day, the video game they're playing in hockey where Gretzky sucks and the Kings are terrible is EA Sports NHL 93. For the Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis, yes.
I did not grow up playing video games, so that's interesting.
No, you didn't. You grew up following the rules, getting permits, and not playing video games.
I didn't say, I'm just saying permits are not the devil is all, you guys.
And in NHL 93, you could fight and you could make the other guy bleed on the ice. And apparently this is just a skill that Vince Vaughn had, and so they decided to put it in the movie. He was good at getting Gretzky to bleed, and so they put it in the movie.
All right. We are running out of time. Rob, any final thoughts on Swingers or what it meant to you? Anything you want to close with, sir?
I just think it is a snapshot of time, because that whole swing dance revolution was pretty short-lived. And this movie is made 2 years earlier, 2 years later. It might not have that same feel to it. And yet it is since that time is out of time, right? A 40s tradition being done in the 90s. You can watch it at a later time and it's still a movie out of time. And yet at the time, it was exactly what you needed it to be. So yeah, I just think this is such a well-written movie. And as I said earlier, if the product is good going in, working with the right people, the product's good coming out. And it doesn't matter that it was made for much less than blockbuster movies.
Right.
Still excellent.
For sure. And I agree with you. I think that this movie is sort of perfectly placed, and that thing that we always call the overnight success, where that actor really took 10 years of shitty parts to get the one big one or whatever. It's that moment in time, but for a film, not a human or a director or a person or whatever. And I think that the other thing about it, we've talked a little bit about this on the show, the three of us together, that some movies don't hold up very well over time because the mores of the day were different. And Caddyshack is interesting because we sort of called that a museum piece. It absolutely still works, but you could never make it today. I think you could make a movie like Swingers if you figure out whatever that's, you pull out the swing dance revival and you put in, I don't know, craft cocktailing, I don't know what, but something. And the rest of it still stands up. They are young guns on the hunt, which every 20-year-old does, no matter what their gender, and they are they're non-PC, but they're also non-abusive. They are exactly the people they are today. And I love that because that doesn't always happen. And so I love that you get to watch this movie, which is all about getting in each other's pants, or trying to get Mike out of Michelle's pants anyway. And it does it with grace that holds up over 25 years. I love that.
It does hold up. And my favorite part about this movie is this is a movie about friends supporting each other through struggling times, that time in the early 20s, mid 20s, when you are trying to find yourself and trying to go accomplish something, and you are just tilting against windmills and butting your head against the wall, and having that kind of support group there to back you up when things are going down is so important. It was so important for me. It's probably important for Rob, for everybody, if you're lucky enough to have that crew, and then to have Jon Favreau write a story about his crew and then stick to his guns to make sure his crew was in the movie, and then to watch people go on to have such success, largely in part from his decision. Like, nope, if I'm gonna make this, it's gonna have my boys in it, and that's all there is to it. And he pulled that off, and it was great. It was fantastic.
Can I make one more quick point
Robbie,
about the final scene in the movie where it's just Trent and Mikey sitting at the diner?
Yep.
And Trent thinks that the girl is making googly eyes at him and little baby things and that kind of stuff. And then it turns out she is just actually talking to her own baby. Yeah. And she walks out, and then Trent tries to act like nothing's wrong, like that just didn't happen. Goes back to the conversation, and Mike just looks at him. That's the moment where, we all realize that there's a time when we think we know everything and we've got it all on lock and we're smarter than everybody else around us. Right. And we see the world the way it really is. And then every once in a while, the world comes up and smacks us in the face and said, you don't know shit.
Yeah.
And the guy who didn't think he knew what was going on could look at the guy who did think he knew what was going on and say, you know what? You're just as full of shit as I am. You're just, you're just bolder about being full of shit. And you know what? That's why we're friends. And I just love that last moment of the film right before it cuts to black.
And you make a great point that there is what I'll call an unrelated second film that Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau do together. I mentioned at the top of the hour, called Made. It is not a sequel. It is not related to Swingers. It is worth your time to watch, I think. My brother and I have literally like a 20-year-old back and forth scene from the film where they get a per diem. They are 2-bit low level mob men who want to get made, and it's worth watching because they, as you now know if you didn't know before, but they were truly friends in real life. I'm sure they're friends to this day in real life, and that really shows up by the end of this film and the way that Doug Liman and Favreau put it together. And also, of course, in Made. So that would be worth watching, too.
And speaking of pals and one pal being full of shit, the next movie we're going to do is going on February 20th. It is going to be Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh, my.
Without question, one of Rob and I's favorite films of all time. Apparently you like it a lot, too.
I do like it a lot, yeah.
It's a huge movie. We're very, very excited about it. So keep watching at scottsiegler.com or facebook.com/StorySmack. For news of the next review, we'll get that up. Rob, one quick thought on Big Trouble in Little China, and then we're going to boot your ass out the door.
Listen, just hit the gas on the Pork Chop Express. I'll be there. All right, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much, as ever.
Rob. Love you, baby.
Bye, guys.
Love you, pretty baby.
You're
Back
so
to
money.
Maine. He is absolutely
I mean,
money.
he's so money, though. He's so money.
If you guys are listening to this on the podcast, the next episode will be episode number 65. Again, that will be Big Trouble in Little China. And now the perfect, lovely voice of Miss A. Sigler will take you out of this podcast. Go for it.
And that is it for episode 64 of StorySmack. You can find Scott and I online. Scott is at Scott Sigler on Twitter and Instagram, and his Facebook page is facebook.com/Scott Sigler. I am at ARealGirl on Twitter and at a.real.girl on Instagram.
And you can find information about the show when we post it at facebook.com/StorySmack. We stream StorySmack live at facebook.com/Scott Sigler, twitch.tv/Scott Sigler, and youtube.com/Scott Sigler. We do it every other Saturday. We would love to have you join the live stream with us. And then we do encapsulate these and put them in the podcast feed.
In addition to StorySmack, we do a weekly live stream called Sigler in Place. It is on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. right here where you're watching this if you're watching us live. If you're not watching us live, we are on twitch.tv/Scott Sigler, facebook.com/Scott Sigler.
That's right.
Or youtube.com/Scott Sigler at 6 p.m. Pacific time every Wednesday.
It's a ton of fun. We avoid all the politics. We just make fun of everything and have a good time. We also, because we're just content crazy, we release an unabridged episode of one of my novels every week. They are serialized. You get the whole thing. You get the episodes for free via iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. Just go to scottsigler.com/subscribe for the links.
We do hope you subscribe so you can hear Scott's books and more StorySmack goodness in the future.
And until then,
we
will talk to you all. Hold on, wait, I gotta get this queued up. We'll talk to you all
real soon. Love you guys.